Hey Matt, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm on your coast this time, so the timing perfect. Typically it's a little bit earlier, so I'm fully into the day. We are here and ready. It's awesome. Very cool.
Nice.
Okay, awesome. So I'd love to kick this off. We're gonna kind of dive into a little bit of everything. I know your time at the Martin Agency has had you wear a couple different hats and
hmm
definitely touch a few different projects. So I'd love to just kick it off by having you share a little bit about where your background kind of falls and what are some of the responsibilities that you're handling right now at the agency.
Yeah. So my background is a little unique in that I worked for a very small five-person production company for a number of years out of college. And that is what kind of taught me to wear a number of hats. And jump around as a bit of a Swiss Army knife. And eventually I ended up as a producer there and was pulled by McGarry Bowen in Chicago, working across brands like Walt Disney World, Hershey's, Kraft Heinz products, which then brought me to the Martin Agency, where I touch many of our brands. Initially brought on for the UPS account in performance and digital marketing. And UPS has kind of opened the door to a lot of different types of work and different things that I handle. And so now I oversee, well, I had previously overseen much of our digital production and what we were doing in our company Superjoy, and helped build the digital and social team there. Got that into a good spot and handed it over to another producer who now runs that team. And then I'm helping build out our larger social capability in the agency, alongside our head of social. And so it's really exciting, and it's also interesting. I feel like people in the digital social space, it's just an ever evolving, ever changing place to be. And that's what excites me. I mean, I enjoy that. Having previously done only banner ads as a digital producer to now running all sorts of different campaigns and experiential and influencer marketing campaigns. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love that. It makes me think a little bit more about like I know digital's a portion of what you do, but it can really run the gamut, whether you're,
Mhm.
doing things on the ground. I mean, you're very event active, I want to say, across many different partners that you guys have. So from a creative lens, obviously, like where do you start? I imagine throwing there's like full team, there's color involved, there's whiteboards, but I know we also live in like a remote world. So how does it start? How do ideas kind of where do they stem from and what does that process look like creatively for you?
Yeah, I think what's interesting when looking at the creative process, you can kind of look back and think through to make a broadcast spot or a TV commercial, it's your traditional creative team. You have your art director, your copywriter, everyone's kind of ideating and just they're throwing ideas at the wall, and presenting those ideas to clients to go out and then make the thing. And that looks so different now. You might have art directors and copywriters, but then they might be teamed up with producers and creators and um, different marketing managers and things to make sure that everyone's in the room and has a voice to help in that creative process. And so, at the Martin Agency, we look at it from the standpoint of how can we make the best impact for our client. We know that when you impact culture, you impact sales, and so from that, you need a lot of people in the room. It's not only the creatives that are ideating. It's a lot of the times it might be kind of what you described, where it's just like a few people, like they're getting down and they're thinking through ideas, and that is I think a lot of the case depending on what's happening. But with these larger campaigns that have so many different deliverable types, I mean, was it 20 years ago that it was just a few spots that you were delivering, and now it's a few spots plus how many social posts, how many digital assets, managing full influencer campaigns and looking at the full funnel to make sure that everything's covered for our client. That takes a lot of different people, and we would say that everyone in the room has a creative voice, right? So if I'm in the room, then I have a voice to help impact that creative and say what I think might help in market, depending on what we go with.
I think that's really cool because we've had the like awesome opportunity to have partnered on a couple different projects. And what's different with working with Martin is that These ideas are so fun. I mean, I think it takes us back to, the reason why we love social marketing, social media marketing, working with influencers, because you can really just have fun. At the end of the day, we might not be curing cancer or anything like that. But we're living in a world where I think creative possibilities are endless. And so you guys come to the table with these awesome ideas, and it's way more involved than just your typical, creator hold this lipstick and then
Right.
get them to purchase, et cetera, like that. So I want to talk a little bit about creators. And I know that in talent as a whole, I know you've worked with them at different levels, whether you're thinking about
Hmm.
celebrity talent you've plugged or smaller influencers. Give us a little bit about, give us a little insight on the way in which you've worked with them and the buckets that they filled for you guys on different projects.
Yeah, I think what's really great about creators, excuse me, in general, is that they can really impact every level of the funnel, the marketing funnel. And so when we're looking at utilizing creators, it's like, well, yeah, could we get a big celebrity to fulfill the top of the funnel? Well, sure. And how are we going to do that? I mean, we could have the celebrity show up in an event, we could have them in the spot, we could have them we could have them on social media and posting something, and that's common too. Or we can get a whole bunch of medium to micro influencers and have them show up in that way as well. And then through the funnel, I mean, they're then driving that conversion and they're driving that impact for the campaign. And so I think a lot of times that when we're looking at utilizing creators and influencers, we're saying, well, what is it, what's the end result? What's the KPI that we're trying to hit for this particular client on this particular campaign? And how are we going to best do that? And then what's the media mix for that? So we'll work really closely with our media partners and we'll say, okay, we need this much money for our content creator campaigns, and then we're going to use this much money in paid digital spend, and then this much for potentially broadcast or connected television. And then we just kind of go from there and we determine who is best for what campaign. And we had a couple I've had a number of campaigns across UPS where it's like, okay, we're going to get 20 micro influencers that are going to kind of help in reaching out to the different demographics and sub demographics for the campaign. And then we're going to get, one more medium level who's going to kind of round things out, or maybe a couple medium levels who are going to round things out. And then we're going to let the potential, TV spot kind of run for itself to fulfill that top level. And then we'll sprinkle in some digital. So yeah, I think that we try and approach our marketing campaigns as, recognizing that it's not a one size fits all. We want to actually fit the campaign to the client and what the client's looking to achieve. And also be thought leaders in that room and say, well, we think that you need to do this to get this result.
Yeah, I love that. I love those examples too. And I want to get into more if you have other examples with specific partners where it's definitely multi-channel in nature. But I want to back up and talk a little bit about some of the research that you might do, because obviously to like creative that's backed by insights that are real, whether it's like cultural insights or really hard and fast social or digital insights. I'm sure that's fueled a lot of the creative process and like brainstorming and across your campaign. So like what does that research portion look like, and what kind of insights are important to you?
Yeah. So what's interesting about data is something that's talked about a lot in the agency, a lot in a lot of media agencies as well, of course. And I think when we approach it, we look at the data, but being right on what the data says doesn't always necessarily matter. And so oftentimes we'll say, okay, well, this is what the data is showing. Like this is the subdemographic that we're looking to reach, and we're going to do this best by partnering with this said creator in the gaming space, and actually have them activate. We did something with Axe and Fortnite. And so we partnered closely with a rather famous creator and had them, play in the game and helping us create throughout the game. And so that was the right choice. We saw the data, we saw his data and said, okay, this makes a lot of sense for who we're trying to reach. And the reach was, exactly what we were hoping for. And so I think the data is really important when you're looking to choose creators for the campaign, because we want to make sure that, their following is who we're looking to reach. On the flip side, sometimes the sub demographic that maybe the client is interested in might be different than what the creator can provide, but maybe we know that there might be like a complementary demographic that it's like, well, let's use this creator and see if we can reach some different people in a new way, or get them interested in the brand from this point of view. And just kind of almost using it to leveraging the data to our advantage to then say, well, hey, let's just give this a try. And I mean, and so much of this is also just testing and learning, right? I mean, when you look at TikTok, it's like, well, we don't necessarily know what it's going to take to get this to go viral because no one has memorized the TikTok algorithm. But we know that if we test and learn enough and iterate enough, I mean, we're going to get a decent amount of wins for our clients.
I was just going to say that you guys have such an appetite to just like try it and see, like really lead with your gut, which hasn't always been a place to or a space to play in for a lot of like advertisers out there. It's very much so like, let's go with what works, stick to the rules. But that's why I'm like, it's so much fun to see the work that you guys are putting out there. Because some of it that does pop off might have been just a test, you're really trying to see like what would actually work. So do you have any examples of some fun projects that you've worked on, or things that you're particularly proud of, maybe things that maybe more challenging, if you want to be a little bit discreet?
I have a few. So one that I'm really proud of still. So, I mean, we all remember when we went into the lockdowns, and it was just kind of a time of like, well, what are we going to do? And everyone thought the world was going to come back to normal in 2 weeks. And same, we were all like, okay, we'll see you in 2 weeks. But naturally that didn't happen. And I think around that 2 week period is when the brands and everyone were kind of like, okay, well, we got to keep moving and we need to keep pushing, because brands are pulling back, but we're not going to pull back. We need to keep forging ahead. And at the time I was on UPS rather heavily, and we started thought around this idea called Thanks for Delivering. And I loved that. We essentially we worked with them to purchase a whole bunch of out of home all across the area, or all across the nation, sorry, in particular spots where we knew that not only UPS drivers would be driving by, but FedEx and Amazon and all the different delivery services. And we did a Thanks for Delivering campaign, letting them know, thank you so much for essentially keeping the world moving, because they were the logistics partners and suppliers giving us what we ordered on Amazon to, keep us going. And, I just thought that was really cool in the way that we were able to so quickly bring it to life. And it was a full funnel campaign in terms of like, we weren't necessarily looking for KPIs. Like our KPI was to make sure that people saw this. So I guess it would be brand awareness, but it wasn't even brand awareness. It was just like, we wanted to just say thank you. And I think that was really cool, because there wasn't really a monetary tie-in to make sure that we got eyes on ourselves. It was more so, well, how can we make sure that we're saying thank you to you all on a regular basis, and that you're seeing that, because we knew that they were working crazy long days and that it was hard. And then we kept it going utilizing creator marketing, and we activated quite a few micro level influencers. And then we partnered with Elaine Welteroth and some other more medium level, and really started to activate. And then that actually tied into the next set of campaigns that we still do for UPS now that I absolutely love. And we call them our Proudly Unstoppable campaigns. And for these, we also build out a full, it's a full campaign. And these ones do have set KPIs for them. But they're all in recognition of the small businesses, and the small businesses specifically using UPS and what UPS can do for them in the different demographic markets. So that like in February, we do the African American small businesses. We'll do the Latina small businesses in the fall. We'll do women's small businesses, LGBTQ in June. And then we partner with them and we give out grants to, depending on the spend, we'll give out grants to the small businesses. And then we'll also make a donation as well. And I think that that's just really cool because it's a company, essentially putting their money where their mouth is, where it's like, no, we do care for you and we do want to partner with you. And then on the flip side, from our standpoint as an agency, I mean, that's an idea that we came up with and that we pushed and that we're able to then utilize and continue getting out there. I mean, all of these have huge components of, we'll make a spot, we'll make tons of digital deliverables, websites, and then we come up with fun activation ideas. We made a lens for the Latina one last year that was super cool. And then they all have a level of, creators and influencers that are part of the campaign as well. And what we're really trying to do is make sure that those creators and influencers are also the small business owners, so that it all ties in together. So those two campaigns are some of my favorite. I could get into some difficult campaigns.
But I love that you mentioned, I mean, that's something we saw a lot of brands kind of trying to lean into doing more than just another ad campaign, more than just another marketing campaign, and try to really tell a story during COVID. And we see it even more now, and having some sort of, social impact, some human impact, I'll even add, across these efforts. So it's great to hear that that's something that you guys have done really well. And I'm sure that continues to fuel a lot of the upcoming work that you do, because, as consumers, I think we're far from the days of just accepting things that are tone deaf, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and really trying to, we're complex in what we want to consume and, the behaviors we want to take after consuming such content. So I don't know, I think you guys are really thoughtful with that. So that's a good example. Do you try to, involve some sort of social or cultural moment across every campaign? What do those conversations look like with your brand partners? Is it always, super well received? Do they have ideas on their own and you guys come together, or what does that look like?
It truly depends. And obviously, some of our partners are a little bit different than others. A lot of times, a client is coming to us for our thought leadership on their brand and how would we build out their brand for them that maybe they might not be thinking of. And we're also very intentional as Martin to make sure that who we're partnering with essentially has the appetite for going after new things or trying new things as well. And so it's often like a give and take. And so there's times when the brand will come to us and they'll brief us on an idea, and we'll take that brief and we might rewrite it and come back and say, we think that you're going to get the same amount of awareness or the same amount of performance from this if we were to go about it in this way with maybe a different media mix. And what I think is really cool, specifically with Martin, is that, we really do team up really well with the client and also the media agency of record. And you don't always see that between a creative agency and the outside agencies. I mean, you'll often see it inside of a holding company where it's like,
Sure.
one of our sister agencies, if they're also the media company, then in theory, we work a little bit better together. But we really strive very hard to work together with whoever is chosen to make sure that what's happening in market reflects what we think is best for the campaign and ultimately best for the client. And so, yeah, I would say that we'll often partner really closely with our client, but then we'll also bring rather bespoke and sometimes out of left field ideas and just do it. One example is recently for TIAA, the dress that we had made. And that was incredible. And I mean, what people don't know is it's not like that was being worked on for months and months and months. I think it happened over the course of 2 or 3 weeks. And so that was an idea that we just very quickly came up with, and I can't take any credit for it. I'm not on TIA, but but it was a great idea that our team came up with, and then to contract out the artist that would make the dress, and then who we had wearing it, and New York Fashion Week. I mean, it was just absolutely amazing, and to be able to get that done that quickly, and those are the ideas that we are constantly coming up with and pitching to our clients and then just making happen. So in terms of like internally as an agency, we do have a cultural outlook that is sent out every day. And that is handled by our cultural impact lab. And someone is assigned, per day to just essentially go through like what's happening in culture and send that out. And then for our social teams, like social and like cultural teams, they have daily digs, like a 15-minute daily morning meeting that's just like going through what makes the most sense for our team today to activate against and to respond on. And that's how we're able to be reactive in culture and not become stagnant. Because I think a lot of the things that we hear are, by the time the idea got to the client and by the time the client said yes, the idea is gone, like culture's moved on. And we love to partner with our clients to say, okay, do you trust us? And it's just like, okay, handshake. And then we're texting them like, okay, do you like this idea? Okay, cool, let's post. It's posted in 48 hours or sometimes within the day. It depends on what it is.
I think that's great to be able to have you share some of that transparency. 'Cause it just goes back to, how credible you guys have become as an agency. And it immediately brought me back to my days of being like a beauty editor and a journalist, where you have things that are changing hourly sometimes, it's like next beat. Granted, it's not hard and fast, news journalism, but
sure, it's still news.
Yeah, still news. And so, there were daily coming up with ideas, thinking about what's happening, and what's popping off and what's dying now. So I think that's really interesting to have that transparency. My next question was going to be, what does planning look like? And I'm hearing it sometimes as long as, what's next year to what's happening next weekend. What does planning look like for you?
Yeah. So, from a planning's perspective, our brand planning in terms of, what are we going to do for our campaigns for the year? It's so different. And still, I would say, I don't want to say it's traditional because I still think our planners are not necessarily traditional. I think they're often coming up with new ways to brief something in or activate against it. But depending on the client, depending on the year, we might say, okay, well, we're going to have, these 3 projects against this one campaign that all include this mix of television versus digital versus out of home versus influencer and content creator campaigns. And that's plannable. You can sit down and you can look at that and you can kind of plan out, okay, against this particular campaign that we've been running for however long, we're going to do this and we're going to ideate against it and we're going to come up with new ideas that are going to spark new life into this creative. And then we have another set of planners, essentially, which we have purposefully sitting in the Cultural Impact Lab for our social and cultural teams. And so they're more so cultural and social first strategists, and they're the ones that are a part of basically writing these playbooks. And so we'll basically say, like, here's your playbook that we want this team to activate against, and here's all the different sub-demographics that we want to activate against. Here's some of the different ideas and channels that we're looking at that makes sense. Here's some different partnerships that we kind of strive, we might strive to partner with, or just some different creators that we would say could be good for this brand. And then here's the tone of voice, and here's a general sense of the visuals, and go. And those are the teams, I think, that then kind of work in parallel with our brand teams, where, if your brand team is kind of the inner circle of the team that's kind of managing the full look of the brand, the full everything that comes out of the brand, then you have these cultural insights and social people that are surrounding them and constantly ideating and coming up with new ideas throughout the week that we can be activating against and getting the brand top of mind to our clients, or not to our clients, sorry, to our audiences. And then the brand can still be working on the longer term calendar for the year and the longer term campaigns. And so we're always sprinkling in UPS or TIAA or Axe. And so I think in the way that we build and plan for our teams, it's really a 2-track model of having these different sets of thinkers and these different types of creatives in the building, really, that are doing, the more the more traditional type work, but I just don't like that word for this, but like the more traditional type work, and then the more culturally responsive work. And then they come together, and everyone is just like, love it, let's do it. And sometimes it just requires more power from the brand side. Sometimes it requires more power from the cultural lab side, and we all just kind of come together and get it done.
Yeah, while you were mentioning sort of like all the moving parts, one, I mean, again, great interdepartmental collaboration. We love to see
Yeah.
it start to finish, not just at the end, right? And so thinking about planning, are you seeing certain trends where there's more, budget, for example, in like a media mix for a partner? Is there more budget being allocated to the TV stuff because that might take a little bit longer to produce, or is it
Mm.
digital to maybe test first with like a couple creators, or what is that, or I guess social specifically? How's the media mix looking across partners, and obviously, like, does it vary? I feel like I'm going to answer that and say yes, but
So it varies.
yeah.
Um, um, but I think we're seeing that change, right? And what's interesting is when you look up digital media spend, I mean, connected television and online video is included in that digital spend, because when you look at Roku and Hulu and all those, they all tend to come up as digital spend. And so the way that we get to making that deliverable, or that product, is similar to what we would have done on a broadcast spot, right? And so those are still very much, the content is still very much what we need to be continually making. And it just goes at a different speed than your everyday always on content that needs to be essentially feeding the feeds. And so in a media mix world, I do think that there's still a heavy spend on broadcast. I do know that just in general from research that's declined, but I think it's been replaced with similar, from Hulu, from Peacock, from all those. So we're still seeing ads that are TV spots, and those haven't changed a ton. I think what's gotten nice about them is that they're a bit more interactive. I mean, I can scan the QR code and open up then that site that was made. And so then there's more spend going to maybe some of these online experiences. I think a great brand that does this is Starbucks, playing with all the different stars and all the things around each holiday and cultural moment. That's so smart. And being able to think outside the box and create those for our clients is something that we strive to do on every brand. And really, it's regardless of the media mix. I mean, we'll work with the client and say, we think you need X for broadcast. We think you need X for connected TV. We think you should partner with X for a DCO strategy. And then we think you need X for your social and content marketing strategy. And then, in general, organic tends to live with us. And so that's a little bit different, but from boosting and things like that. I mean, it depends on a campaign by campaign basis, but that money usually still comes from the media buy. So,
Yep. What about when it comes to measurement? I know the previous session touched on this quite a bit, and I'm sure in your experience, it's looked very different across channels over time in general. What does measurement look like for you on a consistent basis at Martin Agency?
yeah. So let me just clarify. When you say measurement, you're saying like after something is in market and then measuring it and reacting against that measurement to maybe tweak it.
Or just maybe even talk about it to your partners. Like when you're thinking about the success of a campaign, what are some of those metrics that your partners are really eating up across the different efforts that you guys have?
Yeah. So when we're looking at the end of the campaign, I mean, what we're really interested in is how relevant the campaign was amongst those that it reached. And so essentially we have like an internal relevance score as to how well it did based on a variety of metrics. But then, in addition to that, I mean, we're looking at engagement, we're looking at how many people shared on social, a lot of the measurement is coming back to social. I mean, you're looking across the feeds and determining, how much was this talked about? What was the sentiment around it? And then, being able to use that to say, X celebrity was incredibly successful. We should get another celebrity of this level, or that same celebrity. We should have them come back. Or X amount of medium influencers was incredibly successful. We should have that come back. But then you take, a brand like Geico, for example, and I mean, there's just absolute love for Geico across all their spots. And so it's like, how do you bring that to life? And actively working with a client on what that looks like. So it's a bespoke. I mean, it's bespoke to each client, like how we measure and how we're going to talk about that measurement and what we want to activate against next. But that just comes back to what is it that they're looking to perform on, and what are the KPIs to make sure that we're hitting that, and then are we keeping the brand relevant in culture? Everything that we do really does go back to the impacting culture and impacting sales. And I think that's been really, well said and well done by Kristen, our CEO. And it's driven throughout the agency. It's everything that we stand, up against. So.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, as much as, influential, very data led, very insights heavy and strategy oriented, we still totally value like cultural relevance, and, working with you guys and making sure that is maintained true across efforts has been like super fun. But just in general, then think about, on an individual basis, what do I want to say, or what kinds of things do I want to be part of in like our professional careers, things that made someone feel a certain way versus, millions of people viewing something. It's
Right.
sometimes a little bit deeper than that, which is
Right.
like here. So thinking, I guess, moving forward kind of leads me into, what do you think about innovation, and what does innovation look like in the ad space? Dare I say metaverse, but
Well, you said it. I'm just kidding.
I know.
So yeah, I think innovation is recognizing that we just always need to adapt and be okay with change. And I would say that Martin's very good at this. Obviously, I'm biased, but we are constantly looking at, what does the future look like? What is it that we need to build toward? And what should we be working on now to make sure that we're not left behind later? And it's not so much that we're not left behind, but like, we don't want our clients to get left behind in XYZ. And so, when the metaverse was really, on the news feed for every other article, we were definitely ideating against that and ideating like, how can we activate in the metaverse? What does that look like? And I mean, Web 3.0 is going to be totally different anyhow. And I don't think that we all really know what that's going to look like. I think there's been a lot of different theories and lots of talk around it. But one thing we do know is that it's going to be community-based. And so how can we build and foster that community, and what does that look like for our brands to do that? But then also, what's the appetite for that? Building and fostering community takes time and money. So do we want to do that now, or do we want to wait a little bit and foster community in a different way, on TikTok right now? And so, yeah, I think in terms of innovation, it's not necessarily, a shiny new product that we're building. I think it's just ever evolving and being okay with that change. And I know the people that, especially that we look for, are okay with the change. And then, having been a producer by trade, I mean, we know from day one, it's like, well, we're just going to make whatever it is happen. So you come up with that crazy idea and we'll figure it out. And, oftentimes we're able to, like the TIAA dress, we're oftentimes able to do the thing. And so I think it's having an appetite for change.
Yeah, I love that definition. Innovation, it's not necessarily, and it's definitely not just, metaverse, virtual talent, NFTs and all that fancy stuff. I love what you said. It's adaptability. It's being able to change, because not only are we looking at that again in ads that we consume as consumers in all marketing efforts, but we look for that in people that
Right.
can do that, and be that way. So That's a great definition. I'm going to take it. Readable moment. I want to change a little bit and hear more about your sort of like personal ways of offlining and staying enthusiastic about your work. What kinds of things, wake you up every day? What keeps you inspired?
So my 3-year-old daughter wakes me up every day. Um, but no, yeah. So I mean, although it was a joke, in general, it is my family and friends that wake me up every day. I mean, why am I getting up and why am I in a career and working as hard as I'm working? Well, it's of course to support them. And I think that that's really important to just always kind of like recenter myself and remember, like, I'm not doing this thing to further myself. It's for my family and for others. And then, in terms of like keeping me going, I love to read. But like when I say that, I don't mean I love to sit down and read a book with like coffee. I love to scroll and read the news and like the social feeds. I mean, I think that's a form of reading, and I think that's fair. But I'm just constantly staying up to date on, what's happening out in the world. And
Yeah, I call it research for sure.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
my dedicated hour on TikTok is research.
Yeah, it's part of your job. Like,
Yeah,
how are we supposed to stay up on these things if we aren't doing this? Which I guess goes back to why I love my job, because I love doing those things.
yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah. I share that same sentiment for sure. Digital has been like the only thing I knew for sure, like at the start of my career, and like things that like it's definitely what I considered to be always a part of the work
yeah.
that. So totally agree there. What about when it comes to advice? So what kind of advice have you gotten over the years? What kinds of advice would you offer to folks wanting to get into this space?
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah, so I think one piece of advice, which this is going to come off a little bit harsh at first, so then I'll clarify it real quick. So, but one piece of advice I got from a boss at McGarry was just not to ever assume that you're not the smartest person in the room. And I think what's interesting about that quote is that it's sometimes hard for me. It was hard for me as a person to believe that what I had to say was valuable in the room. In actuality, though, what I have to say is valuable. It's why I was hired. It's why I'm invited to the meeting. And so if my voice isn't valuable in the room, then there's no need for me to be in the room. And so I think remembering that quote, it's like, don't assume I'm not the smartest. Well, it doesn't mean that I am the smartest,
Yeah.
but it means that I have something to contribute. And so a piece of advice that I would give people looking at advertising or just looking at any career is just recognizing that you were hired for a reason and your voice in that room and your voice is likely different than the person sitting next to you or even your boss, and that is valuable and that's why you're here.
Yeah, I love that. It's definitely, I think I hear more often, especially, I don't know if it's since COVID, but I think a lot of people had some time to reflect over the years on, are they happy in their roles? If they're in a role that's potentially like unexpected or new for them, feeling what we call imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
that hindering a lot of people's potential as an individual, right? And so I feel like I'm a huge proponent, like we're here with like a total like set of gifts individually and
Hmm.
use those in different ways, whether it is professionally, whether it is at home and things like that. So that's really inspiring. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I love that. I want to talk about what about recharging? So are you someone who you're working remotely, I
Yeah.
assume, most of the time? Do you find
Yeah,
yourself
like 50-50.
closing your laptop like 5, 6 on the dot, or what do you do post work?
Yeah, so not always. Oftentimes, well, let me take a step back. I do actually try to close the laptop around 5. It doesn't mean it stays shut. And so I
No.
think what COVID kind of taught everyone is that it's healthy to have a work-life balance, but I think it is just that it's a balance, and it's not always even a balance. I mean, sometimes it's like, I don't know if this is really showing up very well, but it's just like an ever circular um, uh, thing that we have to work on, and making sure that you yourself are balanced in what you're doing. And so, um, I will close the laptop and I'll let people know if they're slacking me or whatever, that, hey, I'm having a family dinner or I'm having family time or whatever. And then I'll hop back on at like 7:30 after my daughter's down. And the thing is if something's gonna blow up, then they're gonna call me and I can answer the phone and that's fine.
Yeah.
But 9.5 times out of 10, I don't I don't get that phone call. It's just a Slack message later that it's like, oh yeah, that was resolved.
Yeah, exactly. Is it a fire? Is it a fire drill? Is it urgent type of thing?
Yeah.
I hear you. Thank you for sharing. I think it's super helpful. So yeah, love this. Hey, Chris.
Hi.
Hey, Chris.
I feel like it's an incriminating question to ask if to your employer, if you shut your laptop at 5.
I know.
Like, I work all day, all night.
day.
Yeah.
I'm here for the Martin agency, baby.
Balance. And we love balance.
Indeed. No, I think that's the best thing about, the post-pandemic era is that like we all have so much more time for ourselves, and I'm so much happier working from home.
Yep.
I mean, our entire staff does it. So do you guys still have an office at all?
We do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I go in, I choose to go in about 3 days a week. But that's just because I like being in and around people. And so on Wednesdays and Thursdays, we kind of ask if you're available to please come in, but no one's being told they have to. It's very much what you're most comfortable with. And I think that's great. So we are a remote first company now, but we're hybrid technically by definition.
Nice. Yeah, we actually have that in our email signature. We are a remote first company. I love that.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, thank you so much for being on, Tiffanie. As always, you were fantastic. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Have a good one.